So good morning, everybody, and I thank you for being here and showing patience for my first time in the pulpit, and we'll see how it goes. I will start today with a section from Bear Clifton's Train Yourself Ministry blog, Faith of Our Founding Fathers. History is one of those things that people either love or hate. There doesn't seem to be a middle ground. As American citizens, there's a part of our history that we are in the process of forgetting right now, which concerns the history of the Christian faith and its role in shaping the founding of this great country. It's a history that is seldom taught in schools today. In fact, it's being systematically, relentlessly erased. Increasingly, followers of Jesus Christ and in fact, people of faith in general are being made to feel like they are second-class citizens of this country. The moment you mention God or the Bible or faith, you are told, sorry, you're disqualified. You're just an unthinking Neanderthal. Separation of church and state, thanks for playing. It hasn't always been this way, though. When the nation was first founded, most of the values and beliefs of the people who built it from the soil up, who settled our first cities, who founded our first colleges, who fought for our freedom, who created from scratch the remarkable system of government that we enjoy, that is the envy of the world, were hewn from the rock of Christianity. End quote. But we know this isn't entirely accurate, don't we? In fact, it is quite the opposite. This sounds to me like rewriting history to give more relevance to Christianity than deserved. Though houses of worship were often utilized to spread the seeds of independence, this was more pragmatic than ideological, churches being ideally designed for talking to the masses. It was, in fact, rebellion against the restrictive Puritan dogma that was in large part a catalyst for the breaking free of the reins of tyranny. Nicholas Rathod sums it up well in his 2008 Center for American Progress article titled The Founding Fathers' Religious Wisdom. The genius of the Founding Fathers is that they understood that Christianity could not only stand on its own, but would thrive without being written into the laws and founding documents of this country. In fact, it was likely their own faith that led them to this conclusion. Many of the Founding Fathers, Washington, Jefferson, Madison, and Monroe, practiced a faith called deism. Deism is a philosophical belief in human reason as a reliable means of solving social and political problems. Deists believe in a supreme being who created the universe to operate solely by its natural laws, and after creation is absent from the world. This belief in reason over dogma helped guide the fathers toward a system of government that respected faiths like Christianity while purposely isolating both from encroaching on one another so as not to dilute the overall purpose and objective of either. Only 4 presidents of the United States were officially Unitarians: John Adams, John Quincy Adams, Millard Fillmore, and more recently, William Howard Taft. No president has ever openly identified as atheist, but Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, and William Howard Taft were speculated to be atheists. But the framers of the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights truly crafted the foundation of our nation free from Christian dogma, but aligning more to all of the 7 Unitarian principles, which is probably where we got ours from in thinking about that. The Age of Enlightenment, beginning with Sir Isaac Newton in 1687, recentered ideas of government from theocratic to the idea that reason is the primary source of authority and legitimacy, with such ideals as liberty, progress, tolerance, fraternity, constitutional government, and separation of church and state. In the late 1600s, the writings of English professor John Locke presented inalienable natural rights, aligning with our first principle, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. In 1754, it was Benjamin Franklin who proposed a representational government in a document called the Albany Plan. In 1776, the Declaration of Independence, the adoption of which we were celebrating this weekend, is largely about individual rights and our sixth principle, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Defining how these goals are to be achieved led to the Articles of the Confederation, ratified by 13 colonies, which created delegates from each colony to form a Congress, and was in effect from 1777 to 1781. But needing more details, in 1787, 55 delegates, only one of whom was a minister, the rest were civil servants and attorneys and craftspeople. They worked for 5 months to create our Constitution, the first of its kind in the world. The final document embodies our fifth principle, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process. The Bill of Rights was added in 1791 to spell out protections for we the people, embodying the second principle of justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. It was the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment in the Bill of Rights that states, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. Now, this had more to do with the use of government funds through taxes for the establishment and maintenance of churches than creating a separation of church and state, but that is how it was interpreted. Now I will share some tidbits from a few of our influential founders in order of their ages. From Benjamin Franklin, the way to see by faith is to shut the eye of reason. I have found Christian dogma unintelligible. Early in life, I absenteed myself from Christian assemblies. Here is my creed. I believe in one God, creator of the universe, that he governs it by his providence, that he ought to be worshiped, that the most acceptable service we render him is doing good to his other children, that the soul of man is immortal and will be treated with justice in another life, respecting its conduct in this. With this, it kind of sounds like he's invoking Buddhism and suggesting karma instead of judgment at the pearly gates. In 1774, Franklin was present at the founding of the Essex Street Chapel, London's first Unitarian congregation, and he attended also the First Unitarian Church of Philadelphia, which was established in 1796. In 1815, Franklin wrote, "Some volumes against deism fell into my hands. They produced an effect precisely the reverse to what was intended by the writers. For the arguments of the deists, which were cited in order to be refuted, appeared to me much more forcibly than the refutation itself. In a word, I soon became a deist." Again, repeating part of our reading from earlier, Benjamin states, "Religion I found to be without any tendency to inspire, promote, or confirm morality, serves principally to divide us and make us unfriendly to one another. However, exercising tolerance and support for all religions, he lived by our third Unitarian principle of acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations." So, George Washington, quoting a letter from him, wrote to the members of the New Church of Baltimore, "We have abundant reason to rejoice that in this land the light of truth and reason has triumphed over the power of bigotry and superstition, and that every person here may worship God according to the dictates of his own heart. In this enlightened age and in this land of equal liberty, it is our boast that a man's religious tenets will not forfeit the protection of the laws, nor deprive him of the right of attaining and holding the highest offices that are known in the United States." So that means to me, George Washington says it's okay for a president to be an atheist. As mankind becomes more liberal, they will be more apt to allow that all those who conduct themselves as worthy members of the community are equally entitled to the protections of civil government. I hope ever to see America among the foremost nations of justice and liberality. On a side note, I learned that he was friends with Betsy Ross, who was also rumored to have been a Unitarian. So John Adams was raised a Congregationalist and became a Unitarian when most Congregationalist churches in the Boston area became Unitarian. Adams was not a deist, but he used deistic terms in his speeches and writings. He believed in the essential goodness of the creation, but did not believe in the divinity of Christ or that God intervened in the affairs of individuals. He also believed that regular church service was beneficial to man's moral sense. In 1815, Adams wrote of the previous 65 years of his life. For this whole period, I have searched after truth by every means and by every opportunity in my power, and with a sincerity and impartiality for which I can appeal to God, my adored Maker. My religion is founded on the love of God and my neighbor, on the hope of pardon for my offenses, upon contrition, upon the duty as well as the necessity of supporting with patience the inevitable evils of life, in the duty of doing no wrong, but all the good I can to the creation of which I am but an infinitesimal part. Now, this sentiment echoes the interdependent web of all existence in our seventh principle. Thomas Paine has a claim to the title, the father of the American Revolution, because of his little book, The Common Sense, the pro-independence pamphlet he anonymously published on January 10th, 1776. His pamphlet was in part to persuade into action the Quakers who, in their pacifistic beliefs, were loyal to the crown. And those that stayed loyal stayed Quakers, and then the other sect that did fight for the revolution were the Free Quakers. But so many colonists reading it had a profound impact on the people towards the fight for freedom. From his later writing in The Age of Reason, that also seems to align with our third principle, Thomas Paine wrote, I believe in one God and no more, and I hope for happiness beyond this life. I believe in the equality of man, and I believe that religious duties consist in doing justice, loving mercy, and endeavoring to make our fellow creatures happy. All national institutions of churches, whether Jewish, Christian, or Turkish, appear to me no other than human inventions set up to terrify and enslave mankind and monopolize power and profit. Well, that's pretty accurate and a little prophetic, I think. Paine described himself as a deist, saying, how different is Christianity to the pure and simple profession of deism? The true deist has but one deity, and his religion consists in contemplating the power, wisdom, and benignity of the deity in his works, and in endeavoring to imitate him in everything moral, scientifical, and mechanical. In 1777, Thomas Jefferson drafted a bill to establish religious liberty, which was finally enacted as the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom in 1786. He declares, religious institutions that use government power in support of themselves and force their views on persons of other faiths or of no faith undermine all of our civil rights. Moreover, state support of an established religion tends to make the clergy unresponsive to their own people and leads to corruption within religion itself. Erecting the wall of separation between church and state, therefore, is absolutely essential in a free society. This statement did not directly appear in the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment, but it was nevertheless accepted to be implied. And the whole of his words certainly have proven to be exactly the case. In an 1825 letter to Dr. Benjamin Waterhouse, Jefferson provides a profound observation. I am anxious to see the doctrine of one God commenced in our state, but the population of my neighborhood is too slender and is too much divided into other sects to maintain any one preacher well. I must therefore be contented to be a Unitarian by myself, although I know there are many around me who would become so if once they could hear the questions fairly stated. And in 1929, he wrote, I trust there is not a young man now living in the United States who will not die a Unitarian. If only that had come to pass, right? Things would be so much better. Okay, and lastly, we have James Madison, who had in 1789 introduced to Congress a series of proposed amendments that formed the core of what became the Bill of Rights in the Constitution. Madison's proposal for what eventually became the First Amendment states, the civil rights of none shall be abridged on account of religious belief or worship, nor shall any national religion be established, nor shall the full and equal rights of conscience be in any manner or any pretext infringed. The people shall not be deprived or abridged of their right to speak, to write, or to publish their sentiments, and the freedom of the press as one of the great bulwarks of liberty shall be inviolable. The people shall not be restrained from peaceably assembling and consulting for their common good, nor from applying to the legislature by petitions or remonstrances for redress of their grievances. This evokes our fourth principle, a free and responsible search for truth and meeting. Later, in James Madison's Advice to My Country, he writes, I have no doubt that every new example will succeed as every past one has done in showing that religion and government will both exist in greater purity the less they are mixed together. So the foundation of our country was rooted in reason, individual liberty, justice, liberty, and most importantly, a free and fair democratic process. Over the years, court cases have supported this, such as the 1963 ruling by the Supreme Court in Abington School District versus Schempp that banned Bible reading and the recitation of the Lord's Prayer in public schools, and also by the 1971 Lemon versus Kurtzman ruling that established a three-pronged test for laws dealing with religious establishment. To be constitutional, a statute must have a secular legislative purpose. It must have principal effects that neither advance nor inhibit religion, and it must not foster an excessive government entanglement with religion. So that's pretty clear. However, more recently, the First Amendment has been utilized to remove these separations as discriminatory against Christianity. In two cases, the court has allowed state funds to be used for private religious education tuition reimbursement, citing the neutrality test, which requires the government to treat religious groups the same as it would any other similarly situated group. This created a loophole through which our taxes can flow to the churches. In a more recent 2022 blow to secularists, the Supreme Court declared that it has abandoned the Lemon test, the three prongs, and instead will interpret the Establishment Clause in reference to historical practices and understandings. This ruling leads to highly subjective interpretations with more weight on the freedom of religious expression over the right of we the people to not be inundated with public places with dogma, almost always Christian. So in closing, I want to echo our speaker from last week, Dr. Audrey Stryker, to utilize your right to vote. If you believe, as our founding fathers did, for a government to be based on reason, science, morals, come November, be sure to vote for the people who represent your beliefs. As the original Pledge of Allegiance concludes, to the republic for which it stands, one nation with liberty and justice for all.